الحمد لله على إحسانه وشكر له على بره وامتنانه وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله تعظيما لشانه وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الداعي إلى رضوانه أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back for our weekly session on Fiqh Seerah. We've reached the point in which we are talking about the means in which the disbelievers have used against toward the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we mentioned various means. We've started going through them, so we've mentioned the first of those means we've taken is the ridicule, the mockery, and we've discussed that and the benefits related to that, and likewise we discussed the second means, which was the claims, accusations about the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam specifically, and we mentioned we spoke about that also, and we mentioned some benefits in regard to that. And we then moved on to our third means, which we said was the a means of distortion, a means of distorting the actual image of the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fine. This is the third means, and we said that we're going to mention 3 stories in regard to this: the Islam of 3 individuals. The first of the individuals being Dimad al-Azdi, which we discussed last week, the story of his Islam radiallahu an, and the benefits connected to that. Today we want to talk about the second of those individuals, Abu Dharr al-Ghifaari, who is Jundub ibn Junada radiallahu an, the famous companion. Inshallah we'll talk about his Islam and the benefits related to that, and then inshallah next week we can try and take the Islam of Amr ibn Abasa, also the very well known famous companion of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fine. طيب, the Islam of Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. The Islam of this specific companion radiyallahu anh is mentioned in both Sahih Muslim and Sahih al-Bukhari in detail. The story of Islam is mentioned in detail in these books of hadith, in more than one narration. One of the narrations comes from authority of Ibn Abbas, and a more detailed narration comes on the authority of Abdullah ibn as-Samit, and that gives even more details. Fine. In the narration in Sahih Muslim, the narration of Ibn Abbas, fine, we'll just try and summarize it to the best of our ability. This is the hadith of Ibn Abbas in the Sahih of Imam Muslim. Fine, and we're going to try and summarize it and mention some parts mentioned in the other narration also, and just try and tie it all together. To summarize, the narration of Ibn Abbas mentions that when it reached Abu Dharr, the dispatching of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when it reached him, he said to his brother, go to Mecca, go to this place, fine, and seek out knowledge of this individual. Seek out knowledge of this individual who claims that he is a prophet, fine, who claims that he is a prophet that has come with revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal, and listen to his speech, then come back to me and inform me. Then come back to me and inform me of what you find. Basically scope it out. He sends his brother to scope it out. Fine. And so his brother goes. The brother of Abu Dharr goes until he listens to the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, listens to the speech of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he returns to Abu Dharr. And he says to him, I've seen him. In another narration it says that, it gives more detail, and it says that Abu Dharr asked him, what did you do? Ma sana'ta? And he says that I met a man in Mecca, fine, who claims that Allah Azza wa Jal has sent him. And then Abu Dharr asked him, so what did the people say? What did the people say about this messenger or this man that has this claim? Abu Dharr's brother replies, they say sha'ir, kahin, sahir. Fine. He says that the people of Mecca say that he's a what? That he's a poet. The people of Mecca say that he's a soothsayer. The people of Mecca say that he's a magician. And the narration says that the brother of Abu Dharr, his name's Unais, so Abu Dharr Hassan Unais, that his brother Unais was a poet himself. He was very eloquent. He was very learned in regard to language. Fine? And so he says to his brother Abu Dharr, he says, I've heard his speech and I've heard the speech of soothsayers. Fine? فَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِهِمْ. And what he's saying is not the speech of soothsayers. Does that make sense? Fine? And I've put his speech, I've compared it to the speech of poets and to the language of the poets. Fine? And it's not the language of the poets. It's not the language of the poets. And then he says, وَاللَّهُ إِنَّهُ لَصَادِقٌ. He swears by Allah and says that verily he's what? He's truthful. Verily he is truthful in his claim. In another narration, it says that he informs Abu Dharr that he says, I saw him. He didn't say I saw him, he said I saw him يَأْمُرُ بِمَكَارِمِ الْأَخْلَاقِ وَكَلَامًا مَا هُوَ بِالشِّعْرِ. He said, I saw him ordering people and commanding with the best of manners, with the best of etiquettes, with the best of akhlaq. Fine? And I heard that speech from him that wasn't anything to do with poetry. That wasn't poetry. Fine? And in another narration it comes, and all of these are authentic narrations. They just give different details and different wordings. In another narration it says, I saw him, رَأَيْتُ يَأْمُرُ بِالْخَيْرِ وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الشَّرِّ. That I saw him calling and ordering with good and forbidding from evil. Right. So he says, I heard him ordering with good and forbidding from evil. And so Abu Dharr says to his brother, he says to him, مَا شَفَيْتَنِي. He says, what you've said, the information you've given me, مَا شَفَيْتَنِي مِمَّا أَرَدْتُ. He said, you haven't given me what I wanted. You haven't given me enough. I wanted more. Fine? I'm not going to suffice with that which you gave. So what does he do? He prepares for travel and he goes himself. He prepares for travel, he takes what he needs and he goes himself. Fine? So he says, you haven't given me what I desired, and so he prepares to travel and he goes himself and he goes towards Mecca. The Prophet at this stage is in Mecca, so he goes to Mecca himself and he goes to the masjid and he tries to what? He tries to look out for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fine? وَلَا يَعْرِفُهُ. Obviously he doesn't know the Prophet. He doesn't know what he looks like, so he doesn't know what to expect. And likewise Abu Dharr says that I hated to ask, I didn't want to ask anybody. Fine? Why did he not want to ask anybody? Because he knows the position of the disbelievers in regard to the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so for this reason he doesn't want to ask. So he's not asking anybody. Fine? He's just kind of what? Keeping an ear out. Fine? Keeping an eye open to see if he can hear any news or anything regarding the Prophet ﷺ. Fine? Until it got late. Until he got late, so now he's rested. And in some narrations it comes that he drank from the Zamzam water. Fine? And when he was drinking, or when he was resting, who walks past him? Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, walks past Abu Dharr, and he realizes straight away that he's strange. He knows that he's not from here. And so when he sees him, he follows him. Is everyone with me? Fine? And in another narration he asks him. He sees that he's strange, and so he asks him, are you a stranger? And he says, yes, I'm not from here. And so he says, what? He basically says, I'm going to host you tonight. Come to my house, stay at mine tonight. Fine? And so he hosts him. And so Ali radiallahu anhu hosts Abu Dharr until the next morning. Fine? The next morning, Abu Dharr does the same thing. He goes to the masjid and he's trying to get news on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fine? Again, without making it clear of why he's there, because of his awareness of the position of the disbelievers towards the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's done this, and Ali has come to him and seen him in the same state as before, resting, etc., not having found what he wants. And he said to him, أَمَا نَالِ الرَّجُلِ أَن يَعْلَمَ مَنْزِلَهُ. And what he means by this is, have you not reached that which you came for yet? Have you not completed that which you came to this land for yet? Fine. And so he says, no, I haven't. Fine. And so he says, come to my house again. And so he stays with him again. Fine. And every time he's staying with him so far, they're not inquiring, nor is Ali inquiring with Abu Dharr of why he is here, etc., the details, and nor the opposite. Abu Dharr is not really inquiring into who Ali is either. Fine, he's just hosting him. Fine. Then one time Ali inquires. One time Ali inquires. After this situation repeats itself, Ali inquires and says, will you not tell me what is it that brought you here? What is it that brought you to Mecca? Fine. And Abu Dharr replies, watch this reply. Abu Dharr replies, fine, that if you give me basically like an oath, like a promise, an oath, fine, that you will guide me, fine, and likewise that you will keep it between us, fine, I'll tell you why I'm here. I'll tell you why I came to Mecca. And so Ali says, فَعَلْت. Ali says, no problem. No problem. It's between me and you, and inshallah I'll guide you if I can. Fine. And so he informs Ali, fine, and Ali informs him clearly, فَإِنَّهُ حَقٌّ, that which you came for is truth. That which you came for is truth. وَهُوَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And he is the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He said, so now they make the game plan. Fine. Ali says to him that when the morning comes, follow me. When the morning comes, follow me. i.e., I'm going to take you to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So when the morning comes, follow me. And if I see anything strange, if I see anything in which brings me fear over you, fine, in which makes me fearful for your safety, then I'm going to make a movement. You're going to see me do something. You're going to see me as if I'm watering plants, or as if I'm standing against the wall. You're going to see me do some form of movement, fine, to let you know that something's troubling me. I don't want to go forward. Fine. So stop, basically stop in your tracks and don't carry on following me. Fine. If you see me carry on, then follow me. If you see me carry on going, then follow me. Fine. And so they went with this game plan until they entered upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fine. And so now they've gone and entered upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Dharr has heard from him, heard his message, heard his statements, heard his speech, and on the spot he became Muslim. On the spot he accepted al-Islam. Fine. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Abu Dharr, after he's now entered into Islam, he said to him, return to your people, keep everything quiet, keep it secret, return to your people. Fine. And when the news comes to you of our affair becoming widespread, becoming open, fine, when we gain a firm handhold in the region, fine, then come back to me. Fine. Now this is the interesting part of the story. Abu Dharr has finally got there. He's listened to the Prophet, he's accepted Islam. The Prophet has advised him what? Keep it quiet, go back to your people. Fine. And when you hear about us gaining some strength here, then come back. And the reason Prophet ﷺ has advised him this is what? For his safety. It's for his safety. Fine. Now Abu Dharr, obviously you have to understand that when the Islam enters the heart of a person, fine, Iman is something that is hard to restrict. And so Abu Dharr, who's just entered into Islam, he's travelled so far to get this, fine, and gone through extreme hardship to come and listen to the da'wah and the message of the Prophet ﷺ, and finally hear that this is an individual that's sent by Allah Azza wa Jal. He says to the Prophet ﷺ that by the one in whom his hand and my soul belongs, I'm gonna scream and shout between the disbelievers in open public, fine, with my shahada. I'm gonna make it known. Fine. This is exactly what Abu Dharr says. And so he goes until he comes to the masjid, an open place full of disbelievers, and he screams and he calls out from the top of his voice, he says, Ya ma'ashar Quraysh. He said, "O people of Quraysh, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah." Obviously now, we're literally going through the means of the war waged against the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so we know the enmity that they've had, and we've taken so many examples of that, and it's going to come even more examples. He's just gone into the middle of the disbelievers and shouted this. So what do you expect is going to happen? All of the people of what? Have got up and beat him black and blue. Beat him black and blue. In some narration it comes to the point he was KO, he was knocked out. And when he did get back up, he washed the dust, the marks, the bruises, the blood off him. Fine? They beat him until Abbas came. Al-Abbas, fine, came, and he's the one who stopped them and took them off him. How did he take them off him? He didn't just say anything. He said, "Waylakum, alastum ta'lamuna annahu min Ghifaar." He basically he used strategy. He was pragmatic. He said, "Woe to you, O Quraysh! Do you guys not know that this person is from the people of Ghifaar?" Obviously, his name is Abu Dharr al-Ghifaari. He's from the people, the tribe of Ghifaar. Fine. Now, the Arabs of Quraysh, they used to do business with the people of Ghifaar. Ghifaar is very important when it comes to business and trade. Fine. And so he's very pragmatic. And Abbas says to them, "Do you not know that this individual is from Ghifaar? وَأَنَّ طَرِيقَ تِجَارَتِكُمْ إِلَى الشَّامِ أو الشَّامِ." That this person is your path to the Sham area, to the Syrian area, for trade, i.e. for trade. Fine? So your business is technically reliant on this individual's people. And so by him saying that and making them aware of the people of this individual, they've stopped. They've stopped. He basically saved him from even more beating. Fine? Now he's got up and he's washed away the blood. Fine? Cleaned up. What's he done, Abu Dharr radiallahu anh? He's come back the next day and he's done exactly the same thing. He came back the next day and he's done exactly the same thing. Fine? And the exact same thing happened. They beat him black and blue again. Further. And Al-Abbas came back again and used the same tactic until they stopped. Is everyone with me up to here? So is there any questions about the story of the Islam of Abu Dharr? طيب. Obviously we said there's another narration mentioned in Muslim by Abdullah al-Samit, Abdullah ibn Samit, and it's longer and there's more details mentioned, etc. And there's a lot of benefit that can be taken from some of those editions also. Fine. Abu Dharr, he is Jundub ibn Junada, as we mentioned. That's his name. Jundub ibn Junada, known as Abu Dharr. That's his kunya. Fine. Now, people differ over the time that this took place. The actual time that he accepted Islam. When was it? Fine. And so some people say that it was very, very early on in the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ, when he first became vocal with his da'wah. Fine. And from those that mentioned in the Seerah ibn Sa'ad and Tabaqat, it's mentioned that it was early. And other people say that it was his Islam was later on. It wasn't like straight at the beginning of when the da'wah became public and open. Fine. Rather, it was closer to the hijrah. It was closer to the hijrah of Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims to Al-Medina. Fine. And Allah Alam, that which is apparent when you look at all the different narrations and stuff like that, is that it was later. And when a scholar of Islam, Ibn Hajar, who wrote the famous book Fath al-Bari, he discusses the different indications in these ahadith that show to us, fine, that it was very likely that his Islam was later. And one of the indications he gives is that if we look at the story, who hosted Abu Dharr? Who hosted him? He went to Mecca from his people Ghifar, fine, and he's been hosted by someone, because he's a foreigner to the area of Mecca, fine. And so someone hosted him. Who is it that hosted him that we said? Can anyone remember? We said someone hosted him. We said someone noticed him drinking Zamzam. Someone noticed him resting. And so we said, are you strange? And he said, yes, I'm a stranger. I'm not from here. And he said, come and stay with me. Spend the night with me. Does anyone know who it was that we mentioned? Who it was that hosted Abu Dharr when he went to Mecca to scope out and try and listen to the message of the Prophet ﷺ? We mentioned Ali. We mentioned Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. We said he's the one who what? He took Abu Dharr, and he's the one who, when he finally figured out why Abu Dharr was here, he's the one who said, follow me, and they made the game plan, and he said, if you see me do X, Y, Z, then halt, stay still, don't carry on following me, because there might be some danger ahead. Fine? So Ali was the one who took him. Ali, he became Muslim when he was young, according to the correct opinion, when he was very young. We mentioned this. Ali was one of the youngest to become Muslim when he accepted Islam. In this story, he was old enough to host Abu Dharr, to speak to him as an adult, to speak to him and say, why are you here? Cool, come to me and come stay at mine, and host him. He had that individualism at this age. So therefore we know that there was a gap between the Islam of Ali, which was early Islam, and this story. Does everyone understand this point? That Ali in this specific time, fine, he had autonomy in the sense that he wasn't in the house of his family, etc., reliant upon his family. He was his own individual by this point, radiallahu anhu. So he could host Abu Dharr, fine, and offer to host him in his own house. Does everyone understand this point? So therefore he had to have grown. He wasn't still that young boy that accepted Islam. Fine. So this is one of the indications that this story, the Islam of Abu Dharr, was a little bit after. What's important is we haven't. The time isn't too important for why we mentioned the story. Fine, because the reason we mentioned the story, the original reason we mentioned the story, is the fact that within the story is an indication towards the means that the disbelievers used in waging war against the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ. That's the reason we mentioned the story, and then we said there's other benefits that follow on from that. Fine? And so naturally for this reason, the difference of when this story took place, for example, you're not gonna find now a clear, authentic text that says this story happened, this event happened, the Islam of Abu Dharr took place on this day, in this month, in this year. You're not going to find that. Right? And so for this reason, you find that in the books of Seerah, scholars and authors have placed this story in different, sometimes it doesn't always come in the same place, but it comes in different positions in their book, depending on what the author sees fit, depending on where he sees the benefit of putting that story, or depending on his independent reasoning of when he believes the date and the time and the place that this story took place. So he might believe, as some scholars we mentioned, that this took place in the early part of Islam. So in his sequence of Seerah, he's going to put it a bit more earlier. Whereas other scholars might take the opinion based on certain indications, and we mentioned one of them, that it happened later. It happened a few years after the Islam of Ali. Fine? And so they're going to mention it later on in their sequence of events. Fine? Any questions up to here? Very quickly, we'll just see if we can take some benefits from this story, because there are many benefits that a person can take from the Islam of Abu Dharr radiyallahu anhu. Number one is we learn from the story of the Islam of Abu Dharr, we learn how widespread and how well known the affair of the Prophet ﷺ became. Because Abu Dharr was not from Mecca, he was from Ghifaar. Fine? He was from outside, he had to travel. Fine? So the fact that he heard about the affair of the Prophet ﷺ, he heard about the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ, the claim that he was sent by Allah Azza wa Jal, fine? We learn that this must have spread, this claim. Fine? The level of the how far it reached. It wasn't just something that stayed within Mecca. Fine? It reached so far to the point that the Quraysh had to basically wage a media war in warning people away, scaring people off, distorting the da'wah itself. Fine, so this is very important. Fine, and we also learnt this from the story of Dimad al-Azdi. We learnt this from there as well, because the same thing, he wasn't from Mecca either. Fine. Benefit number 2, we benefit from the absence of rushing, the thought that Abu Dharr put towards his movements, towards his actions, how he planned. Because we said Abu Dharr, he didn't want to ask anyone about the Prophet ﷺ. So that means he was thinking about the steps he's going to take. He didn't just do it, he didn't rush. Fine, he took his time and he thought about it. Fine, because he said, I didn't want to ask the people around me. Why did he not want to ask the people around him? Because we said that he knew the position of the Quraysh, the position of those disbelievers and the idol worshippers towards the Prophet ﷺ, towards the da'wah of the Prophet himself, and towards anyone who's going to come and say that I'm here to meet the Prophet ﷺ. There could be harm that comes to the individual that wants to meet the Prophet ﷺ, and likewise there could be harm that's brought to the Prophet himself, the hatred that they had. And so the behavior of Abu Dharr in this regard, he was taking into account safety. He was taking into account safety, his safety, and likewise the Muslim safety. Fine, because if the Quraysh found out why he came to Mecca, some harm could have came to him. Rather, he could have been expelled from Mecca. He could have been turned away from Mecca. Fine, and bear in mind, being turned away from Mecca is not something he wants right now. He's just travelled an extreme distance. The travelling then is not like travelling now. He's gone through valleys. Fine, in order for a purpose, and that purpose is what? To meet the Prophet ﷺ. Fine, and that's why it comes in one of the narrations of Muslim regarding this story. Fine, it says that he said that the brother of Abu Dharr, he said to Abu Dharr, so Unais said to his brother Abu Dharr, he said, وَكُنْ عَلَى حَذْرٍ مِنْ أَهْلِ مَكَّةِ. He said, and be very aware, be vigilant with regard to the people of Mecca, because they have what? لأنهم شنفوا له وتجهموا, because they what? They have an extreme hatred, an extreme enmity, and have taken up many means against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fine. Benefit number 3, again, is to do with what? The careful steps of Abu Dharr. The careful steps of Abu Dharr. And we learn this from where? We learn this that when he said to Ali, I'm not going to tell you about why I came until you give me an oath that you're going to keep it between me and you. So if you give me that oath, then I'll tell you. So I don't want you to tell anyone. Fine? And that you're going to guide me. Fine? And likewise, after that, what was the game plan? That when Ali has now led the way, and he said, if anything happens, then I'm going to pretend to do X, Y, Z, so you know that there's something ahead. Fine? All of this was coverage. All of this was coverage. Fine? For the purpose of safety. Fine? Safety measures taken, fine, to prevent harm from coming to any of them. Fine? And obviously, as they're walking on the path, you guys probably understand this from the context, they're not close to each other. He's not following him from close behind him. He's following him from a distance. Fine? And that which is apparent from the story is that Ali was guiding him towards Dar al-Arqam. Remember we took the story of Dar al-Arqam, and it was a place that the Muslims, the headquarters, the HQ of the Muslims, where the Prophet ﷺ could teach them about Islam, etc. Fine, we've spoken about that in depth. Benefit number 4 is that we learn a lot from the attitude of Abu Dharr in this story. We can benefit hugely from the attitude of Abu Dharr here. Fine. Abu Dharr in this story, and we can apply this to our time as well. Fine. The attitude of Abu Dharr. He didn't just submit to that which he's heard. His brother came back and told him that which people have said. And obviously those same statements have reached him before anyway. And that's why when his brother did inform him of that, he said it wasn't really enough for me, I wanted more. Fine? Abu Dharr didn't just submit something that just circulates, this is how it is, and then he just submits, that's it. Fine. So in this regard, Abu Dharr is very distinguished as an individual. He's not just any other person who's just going to submit and say, no, they say he's XYZ, so he's XYZ. No. Fine. Rather, he was truthful and sincere in finding the truth. Truthful and sincere in finding the truth and following the truth. And not just that, he wasn't just truthful and sincere in finding the truth. He was brave. He was brave. Fine. He showed bravery throughout the story, because some people want the truth and they want to follow the truth. However, they don't have bravery. They don't have courage. Fine. And the evidence of his courage was what? As soon as Iman entered his heart, what did he do? It entered his heart. It ran through his blood to the point that he stood in the middle. Bear in mind, he's a stranger. We have to understand the context here. He's not even from Mecca, and he's one individual. And he's already tired. In some narrations it comes, he stayed 30 days with nothing really to eat until Ali stumbled across him. And for those 30 days he was looking for what? He was looking and searching and listening out. Right? So he's already weak, he's already tired, and he's a strange person in that land. And as soon as Iman enters his heart, as soon as it starts running through his veins, he goes to the middle of people he knows have huge enmity. His brothers informed him, look at what we just said, his brothers informed him, be careful, the enmity they have. Does that make sense? To the point he's taken all these safety measures. But when the Iman entered his heart, what? Straight away he stood in the middle of the people and he said, what? Ashhadu wa la ilaha illallah. Just because he knew what? That it would stir the emotions. Fine? And one thing we can benefit from this, a side point here that you can benefit, is the permissibility of making apparent the truth and saying a statement of truth in front of someone that you might fear their harm. From this we understand a principle, that it's permissible for someone, if I'm in a similar situation where I fear that if I say X, Y and Z is true, X, Y and Z is true, it's the haqq, but there's a slight fear that if I do make that apparent and make that clear and say that statement, some form of harm might come to me. It's permissible for a person to say it even if harm comes to them, and likewise it's permissible for them to remain silent, to avoid the harm. Both are permissible. Fine, they call it a rukhsa and an azima. That a person can take the license Allah has allowed and the Sharia has allowed a person to avoid harm coming to himself and to remain silent. And likewise the Sharia has allowed, the religion has allowed a person to what? Make that clear even if some harm comes to him. Fine, and obviously which one's better? To stay silent or to make it vocal? This depends on the specific situation, the specific circumstances. Fine, the pros and cons of both sides. Fine. We've mentioned the safety measures that were taken on behalf of, and the precaution that was taken on the behalf of Abu Dharr, and likewise his brother, and likewise Ali. Likewise, even from the Prophet ﷺ, there was precaution taken. Fine, because the Prophet ﷺ said to Abu Dharr when he became Muslim, what did he say? He said, return to your people. Fine. حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ أَمْرِ, until there comes to you news of my affair, i.e. until we grow, until we gain some apparentness in this land. Fine. So the Prophet ﷺ in this regard, fine, he pays much concern and attention to the safety and the well-being of his companions. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's something, that's a priority for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Less time's running short. Is there any questions up to here? There's a few more benefits, inshallah. Obviously technical issues, etc. We'll leave it for next lesson. Next lesson, inshallah, we'll wrap up the benefits from the story of the Islam of Abu Dharr, and inshallah we'll move on to the story of Amr ibn Abasa, which is the last of the three stories we want to mention, the stories of the three individuals we want to mention, and we'll try and take some brief benefits from that, inshallah, and then we can move on to the next means, bi-iznillah. If anyone's have a question, just let me know, inshallah. Contact me and I'll try my best to get back. Apologies for the technical issues. Jazakumullah khairah. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. أحسن عليكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.